RPG, and especially pen and paper RPG, is a unique opportunity to play a role that is very far removed from yourself. I mean, for a GM it is nothing special. As the GM you play as, you incorporate strange beings, men, women, dwarf, elves, kobolds, dragons, magical constructs, gods, the worlds, devils, all the time, you don't even stop to think about it anymore. But there's a certain focus, a focus of time and intimacy that comes with playing a character as a player. As a player, you spend way more time on a single character and you identify more strongly with that character. You have a stronger connection, stronger emotional connection than a GM usually has with his NPCs. And I think by trying to play something that is very far removed from yourself, from your own personality, that's a very interesting experience. That is an opportunity you don't usually have. And pen and paper has here an edge over live action roleplay, over LARP. Usually I will tell you how great LARP is, and because of its physical aspect, it's way more immersive than regular old tabletop RPG. But here, tabletop RPG has the edge because it doesn't have the limits that a LARP has. In LARP, I can play an elf lady, but I think the other players would have trouble identifying me as such and to play how I would like them to play and treat my character how I would like them to treat. As other players, as a tabletop RPG, as the GM, it's easier if you tell them what your character is. They know it somewhere in the back of the head and they can try to treat your character as if it were a Dragonborn paladin, gnome sorcerer, warforged rogue, vampire, werewolf monstrosity. And in LARP I'm always limited by my own bodily appearance. I could play a dwarf, and I know someone who's just as big as me who has played a dwarf, and not badly at that. But realistically, I'm way too tall to play a dwarf. I am way too male to play a female, and way too thick to play an elf. I just wouldn't be able to portray these characters optically, physically, to a level I'd be satisfied with myself, and I suspect that would be a huge hindrance for the other players to see the character that I want them to see. And in a pen and paper RPG it's easier because you can outright tell what your character is and describe the character, how he looks like and his actions. And if you've got a bunch of good role players, good GM who can work with all of that and look past the face they see on the opposite side of the table and imagine the elven princess you're playing, you have the opportunity to explore what the world would be like as an elven princess. If you focus just on the mechanical aspects of playing different race, species or gender, it's not that interesting. In most fantasy RPGs, it doesn't matter at all if you play as a man or a woman. Those worlds are usually so egalitarian that it doesn't really matter. And mechanically, there's no difference at all. And it's much the same for all the species and player races you could pick. Mechanically, they are all not that different from playing regular old human. Maybe you're a bit smaller, maybe you can fly, maybe you can see in the dark. Not a huge difference, especially if there's magic involved and you could use magic to make up for your shortcomings as a plain old human. But if you focus more on the role-playing aspect, the character, their motivations, their outlook on the world, then it becomes very interesting. What would it be like to live for hundreds of years? What outlook would you have when you go out and live among those short-lived species? Could you have a real friendship with a human that dies within 60 years or so? You would have to befriend an entire family of humans and get to know each generation on its own and see them grow and change while you stay more or less the same. What kind of relationship would that be? How would you see the other species? Are they lesser species to you? Or do you even envy them because they are so full of energy and they seem always like they move with purpose? And they always change so fast. They reach their goals so fast. They always look so happy, as if they don't know that they will die in 30 years. What would it be like to be a woman? Or what would be your outlook when you're looking for a mate? What would be the concerns you have when you go adventuring? How would you react if you go into a tavern and someone hits on you with a really bad one-liner? I find as a GM, I'm usually holding back how I think this tavern scene would actually play out and how these tavern guests would actually treat the good-looking elven bard if one of my female players plays her. But if one of my male friends plays her, I actually feel more freely to lean into the misogynistic reaction that tavern might pose to the elf. Unless I know the female player really well and I know that she knows it's all just part of the game, it's an act. I don't actually support this kind of behavior. I have played female characters in fantasy games quite often, actually. And nowadays I find it doesn't make much of a difference. I think all in all the difference between men and women is not as big as we sometimes believe. It's more like different nuances of humans. And there are other aspects that actually have a stronger impact on who a character really is and what their outlook on the world is. It makes more of a difference if your character has access to powerful magic or if he is plain old mundane than if he is male or female. I sometimes ask myself, why am I playing women all of the time? And the answer right now I come up with is that I like drawing my characters And I like drawing female characters more. It's just more fun for me to draw female characters. I appreciate the female form more than the male form. But what I'm really looking for right now when I make a character is to get a different angle on the human condition. Maybe it's my author showing through. But I look for characters that have a really different perspective on life. For example, I asked my GM just yesterday if in his sci-fi campaign I can play the ship's AI. Which would be really, really different from any character I've ever played. Sadly wasn't possible. Would be maybe a bit difficult to handle. But now I'm thinking maybe I should play a character that does not have any of the qualities I usually look for in a character. That is not powerful, not charismatic, not driven. How would the world look from the perspective of someone who is weak, who has to get by being sneaky and manipulative, by attaching himself to others and supporting those others in their endeavors so he can get by himself? How could that character change over time? What would make him become more confident? Or would he really enjoy his role as a supporting character and try to influence the other characters to be the best versions of themselves? That might be interesting as well. And that's really all I wanted to talk about today. What are your thoughts on the matter? What's your favorite character you ever played? Is it similar to yourself? Or is it completely different? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and goodbye.